This morning I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what our investigators have done for the last year, a preview of what we're going to be doing in the boardroom tomorrow, and also to give you a little bit of an up-close view of the pipe that we've been talking so much about over the last year. So the San Bruno accident, I know that you all are familiar. This is the worst pipeline accident that we've had in over a decade. There were 8 people that were killed, scores of injuries, 38 homes were destroyed, and a neighborhood was evacuated. The NTSB has investigated other large pipeline accidents in the past. Going back about 10 years, we saw a natural gas disaster in New Mexico in which 12 people were killed, and we saw a liquid pipeline accident in Bellingham, Washington in 1999 in which 3 young men were killed. And so this is the largest accident that we've investigated in about 10 years. We have actually a record number of pipeline investigations going on right now at the Safety Board. We have 5 major accident investigations going on, and one of the ones that occurred just about a couple of months, it occurred last summer, that involved a liquid pipeline, occurred in Michigan, and the NTSB was actively investigating the Enbridge accident in which scores of thousands of gallons of fuel were released in the Kalamazoo River. It stopped short of getting into Lake Michigan. But we also have major pipeline accident investigations, some with fatalities going on in Florida, in Texas, in Illinois, and Michigan. We have not had the resources to take on a number of other pipeline accidents over the course of the last year, and again, some of those did involve fatalities, and so we have had to turn back at least 10 pipeline accidents that we might have investigated to the state or federal authorities for them to take a look at. And so it has been a year where we've had a lot of pipeline accidents. This is the first one that you're going to see us bringing to the board. When we heard about the accident, we immediately dispatched a team. We had investigators from Los Angeles go to San Bruno. They were our closest field office and help with staking down the scene, making sure that evidence was preserved. We also had investigators leave from our headquarters. We had 12 investigators accompany Vice Chairman Hart, who was our spokesperson on scene. And our team spent about 9 days out on scene in San Francisco, but we have made numerous trips back to San Bruno. Our staff has been back. We've conducted additional investigations, examinations, and we've also had board members who have traveled back to attend community meetings. And I went back this past summer and toured the community, met with the families who had lost people in the accident, as well as some who'd survived, and also did some availability with local media to talk about our ongoing investigation. I know that you all are aware that we had a 3-day public hearing on the accident in March, and during the course of our investigation, we have accumulated a tremendous amount of information, not just at the public hearing, but over the last year. We have really put together comprehensive documentation. There are about 14,000 pages in our docket and our public docket that is open and available to anyone on our website to review. And that information helps us determine issues that we are going to look at and provides the basis for some of our findings in our report. You all know all the parties to our investigation: CPUC, PHMSA, PG&E, the City of San Bruno. They all participated in our public hearing. And let me just identify a few of the issues that came up in our public hearing. PG&E's decision-making process about their determination on automatic and remote control valves, PHMSA's challenges with implementing performance-based regulations, inline inspection tools. We actually had a session where we really looked at how those tools are being used and how they can be used in the future. And these inline inspection tools are often referred to as pigging where they put in a device to look at the inside of the pipe, and that information can actually yield a lot of information about flaws or defects and about changes over time. There's also things that are being done even today. PG&E has done some camera inspections, and so we really wanted to understand what the inspection technology, what could be done today and what we could be looking at in the future. We looked at challenges that were faced by first responders when they responded to the accident back in September of 2011 or 2010. We have had about 40 NTSB staff members involved in this investigation. We have only about 5 pipeline investigators in the whole agency, and so all of our pipeline team has been involved in this investigation. But we have had about 40 investigators involved from across the agency, and that involves the staff in the pipeline division as well as the staff in research and engineering and our materials labs. And this represents about 10% of the agency's workforce, having 40 people involved in the investigation. So at the board meeting tomorrow, we've got 5 board members, and they're going to hear presentations from our staff about some of the major issues that were identified in this report. Our complete report is very comprehensive, but we will be focusing on a handful of issues in the boardroom, the ones that we think are the most salient to the cause of the accident, and you'll be hearing presentations on those. There's going to be a detailed discussion of the following areas: the pre-accident events at Milpitas Terminal, PG&E's emergency response, the pipeline failure and the cause of the rupture, PG&E's integrity management plan and their factors that go into that plan, inline inspection technology, the maximum allowable operating pressure for pipelines that were constructed pre-1970, and the oversight of performance-based systems. At the end of the board meeting, we'll adopt our conclusions, probable cause, and recommendations on the report, and that will be the board's final decision and our final work on the report. Within 30 minutes of our board meeting concluding, we'll have a synopsis on our website and made available to the press, but it'll probably take several weeks for the complete report to be posted to the website, because there might be changes that are going to occur in the boardroom where the report might need to be modified. And so all the presentations that you'll see tomorrow will also be made available on our website, and so those visual aids will be up too. Okay, so what we have here is just a little bit over a 28-foot section of the pipe. Now, if you all remember, after the accident, this is the section of pipe that was ejected from the ground after the rupture and landed about 100 feet from the accident site. And so you're looking at the pipe, and this is north and this is south, and this section starting here, this is part of a longer section that goes south. And I know you all have heard a lot about the pups, and so actually you're gonna get a chance to come look more closely at the pups here. The pups start here, and you can see these girth welds, and the girth welds are the welds that go around like a belt, and the longitudinal welds or the seam welds are the long welds that go down the length of the pipe. So pup 1 starts here. This is pup 1, pup 2, pup 3, and pup 4. There are 6 pups, and 5 and 6 are on a section of pipe that we have. We actually have, even though this is just over 28 feet, we have 56 feet that we took out. So we took out some pipe that goes south and some pipe that goes north. And so on the northern section are pups 5 and 6. Pup 1 is where the rupture initiated. And at pup 4, this girth weld here at pup 4 between 4 and 5 is where the pipe came out of the ground, and it pulled off here down at the longer end of this section. And so you'll see the girth welds when you come up, and you'll also see some longitudinal welds. And so from the outside here, you can see this material. This is a longitudinal weld that goes down this pipe. But you'll see over here there are a number of other longitudinal welds. This section here in pup 1, and on that side too, this is the seam that was cut out. This was where the rupture initiated. And this section is in our materials lab in Washington, D.C. And so we have certain sections of the pipe. You'll see that there are some coupons or some sections that are cut out the pipe in different places. And so these bigger rectangles are actually sections that were cut out to test the material of the pipe. And there's smaller sections that are cut out. And you'll see here around some of the seams. And these smaller sections were cut out to look at the welds. And so you'll see here at the girth welds and also at some of the longitudinal welds. You'll see some of those that were cut out. Some of the things that were important that our investigators identified, and much of this has been released in factual reports dating back to January, is that the quality of the materials of some of these pups were not consistent with the specifications that PG&E had for their pipe material. So we've noticed that the material, some of the material in these pups is substandard. Another thing that we've also put forward in some of our factual reports is that the quality of the welds was also not consistent with what we would expect today or at the time with respect to industry standards. The biggest issues that we identified that I think concerned a lot of people was that we saw in some of these longitudinal welds on the pups that they were welded only from the outside. And so we would have expected to see weld penetration from the outside and the inside of the pipe. And you'll see that when you come up. I'm going to show you some sections there. But in those welds that were only done from the outside, you only get about 50–55% penetration into the pipe. And so you'll see when you come over here, you can see some of the welds that were done in factory, the double submerged arc welds that were done in the factory over here on this section. I'll show you those. And you'll see some of the field welds that were done. The girth welds, we expect the girth welds to be field done because you're taking sections of pipe and you're putting together. So you're going to have girth welds that are going to be done in the field. But the seam welds, the longitudinal welds that were done in the field, those were the ones that we saw particular problems with respect to the type of weld that was done, the materials, and the penetration. And so there were a number of weld areas where we identified the materials, there was contamination or incomplete fusion. All of those things have been documented in the factual reports that we've sent out. But I think another thing that's really good for you all to actually see and lay eyes on the pipe is you can see actually how big a 30-inch pipe is. And so when you come down here and you get on this side of the pipe, you can see inside the pipe. And you can inspect the inside of the pipe. And so this is not something where you can't get to it and you can't see it. And you can see the size of the pups and how big they were and see what the teams could have looked at. This pipe was installed in 1956, but we still do not have records from PG&E to tell us where these pups came from. The pedigree of the pups is really unknown and unconfirmed, and there are no records establishing, to some respect, we've talked about them as mongrels because we don't know what their pedigree is. And we still don't have information about that. And our investigators have identified a number of things that would show us that it's not necessarily consistent with a factory pipe. The orientation of the pipe, the way that it was rolled, is not consistent with what we would usually see. And the material specifications are not what we would expect to see and what we saw in other pipe that's around this area where the pups are. You know, one of the biggest difficulties for our investigators was the lack of records that PG&E demonstrated really throughout the investigation. We were very interested in understanding where these sections of pipe came from, where the pups came from, because our concern is making sure that if there is any defect or any problem that was identified here, we want to get to that throughout the system. And so that was a concern. But even when I was out in San Francisco in June, we talked about a leak that they had had on the same line that wasn't disclosed to our investigative team for 10 months. You know, a good 8 months into the investigation, they identified it. So it appears that CPUC, the regulator, and our investigators didn't have awareness that there was a prior leak on the line. It was about 9 miles south of this accident, but that's a risk factor that we'd certainly want to look at when looking at a pipe as far as inspections.